Counselor Accents Podcast. Two school counselors who love their jobs. Oh, and they happen to have Southern accents too. Bless their hearts.
I'm Laura Rankhorn.
And I am Kim Crumley, and together we are Counselor Accents, two school counselors who are in the trenches with you.
We know what you're going through because we're living it every single day.
So, Laura, we have just got back from doing a little
marathon, is what I'd like to call it.
Oh, yes. We did some training at the University of Alabama during Bama Bound.
Whoa, that was an experience.
It was.
For those of you that are not familiar with what Bama Bound is, it is where parents bring their children who are, in fact, Bama Bound. They are bound to Bama.
We
legally.
got that.
Okay. And they will be attending University of Alabama in the fall.
We were inundated by mamas, daddies, and their children.
And I tried my hardest to convince you to spend a little time. Let's go over to the Bama Bound desk and make people think that one of us is the other one's mother, the other one is the daughter, and we want to register for classes, sign up for a sorority. I didn't care which one.
You wanted me to be the mother, and you wanted to go in knocking on 50 over there, signing up for a sorority.
I thought it would be hilarious, and I would have done it if you had
Turns
said, okay.
Turns out that wouldn't have been the most hilarious thing.
Tell us, I want you to paint a picture, if you will, of, or I can help you paint this picture because I think
go.
Okay,
go.
So we're in the lobby of the hotel. Now we hate to make fun of people.
Oh, we hate to,
but we're about to. Bless her heart. And
bless it.
We were in the lobby of this hotel. I looked at you. Your back was turned. You were facing me. Your back was turned to the people that I could see. And I said to you, don't look now, because you're horrible at looking now. If I say...
You say, don't look now, and I look straight into the eyes
like
of
a
your
pointer
victim.
dog is what you are. That has tickled me. Anyway, so I said, don't look now, but is that lady wearing a swimsuit? And you turned around and go ahead
immediately and did the pointer. I would say that the nether regions were not covered and near enough. And I am just like, I am so embarrassed for you. And
she wasn't embarrassed for her.
She was not embarrassed for her.
When you're not sure if it's a romper or a long sleeve swimsuit, that's a problem.
It is a problem.
We should do a fashion podcast. Live from Bama Bound.
So on our little couple of days that we had together when we were in Tuscaloosa doing our thing for Alabama, we went on our way every year, because we've been doing this for 4 years going down there. And we always stop at the Burlington, which is the best Burlington in the world, which you hooked me up with to begin with.
It was a happy accident. It wasn't me. We went in there for the first time together since 19.
I love the way you're not going to take.
Yes. I will not take credit.
I will not take
to me.
So we went in there, same one, and we
no.
Oh, not the same one.
Not the same one. I was going to let it go the first time, but when you were insistent that it's the same one, I feel the need to step in. So last year you had that migraine that was so bad you could barely see straight, but you could see enough to go
and I
to
fell
the TJ
out.
Maxx.
Fell out on the floor.
I do remember that. You
dragged my body,
your carcass,
over to TJ Maxx, where my ashes will be spread.
Yes, but let me tell you, it is like Resurrection Sunday happened when you saw that Burlington, because up from the grave you arose. And I know I'm preaching now. But you came to life, and then it said, coming soon. It was not yet ready.
I remember that now.
To shop in. So this year, I felt strongly that it would be open. So we took a little detour and went to that Burlington. The happiest accident was when we were in Tuscaloosa and we were out doing a little shopping after our first session, our
No,
first
let me
day.
back up. We
Okay,
were
okay,
not.
back up.
We were worn out because
Okay, yes.
it was an all day.
You're right.
And
I
all
said
of us
first
were
session
in
like it was 30
all
minutes.
day.
Right.
No, it was hours. And so we were worn out. And so we went to eat at a restaurant.
Oh,
Did not
gosh.
choose wisely.
Please don't remind
It
me.
was 100 degrees outside, and I'm not kidding. And there was a puff of little air running through that place. So I
It
had
was
sweat.
100 outside. It was
Well, I don't sweat,
95
but you
inside.
had sweat trickling down your back.
Hey,
You
I
were
learned something about sweat. Then I need to tell you this.
okay.
There's
Tell me now.
there's something called the sugar sweats. Have you ever heard of the sugar sweats?
No,
I
I
hadn't
don't
either.
sweat.
Well, I don't either. But I know someone, and it's not me, and I'm not going to name names, but she may be listening. She just told me that when she eats a lot of sugar, she gets the sugar sweats. And I just feel like that's information you and I need to know.
I think she made that up because if anybody's
No,
gonna
I
get
saw it with my own eyes. And you know my house is cold. I keep my house cold. And I fed her some Oreos, some
and then
Oreo
you start
dessert,
getting the sugar
and
sweat.
she had to take her sweatshirt off, and it was 67 degrees in my house.
Mm,
And she
okay,
had the sugar
back
sweats.
to us
Okay, I'm
having a
sorry.
horrible meal. We went there because this place is known for their pie. We love pie. It was
Oh, it was
awful.
so good. The
So
pie
we
was
were
good.
really, like we said this whole time, when you're traveling, you're gonna have ups and downs. That's what we say. Gonna travel ups. We actually say when you're traveling overseas, but we never travel overseas, so we just say it. So this was a down. And then we decided we'd make ourselves feel better by going get a pedicure mani, a mani panty. Not a mani panty, a mani
Yeah.
petty.
What'd
Petty,
you
not
say?
panty. Panty.
Please don't talk about those. You know I have to make it explicit when
Petty.
you start talking about your undergarments.
So we had a mani petty, not panty, and we went in and got that done. And I had put those stickers on my toes because you buy stickers now that look like toenails, or you put them over your toenails and they look like you painted. So I had to re-sticker myself. And you were sitting over by me after I took all those stickers off my toes. I handed them to you.
You just said,
Dear.
"Here you go," and I thought maybe you were handing me Skittles or something
No,
something
they were my
good. I
toenails.
was
They were my
very
sticky
trusting.
toenails.
So I just
And
opened up my hand and there
then
it
you
was
were
your
gagging, which made me
nasty
very happy.
toenails.
That was but it was still we were
It was
trying to
funny.
recover, and then so we cannot wait to get back to the hotel and work on the next day's presentation and to rest. So we're headed to the hotel when we see a brand new Burlington. It was like you had given us a shot of Red Bull. I've never had Red
I've
Bull.
never
I
had
can
it.
imagine that you're gonna get this adrenaline rush. I don't know. So we perk up like nobody's business and stay in there. Don't do any. We shop like we have all this energy, refound, renewed energy. Shop for like 2 hours after we'd shopped at the Burlington the day before. Like
We
my whole
still
trunk.
we still found stuff.
The thing about the Burlington is you don't know what you're going to find. So
No, you could go to the very same one a week later
and
and
you
it
don't
is
know.
like a desolate wasteland.
And you and I shopping together, clearly you are 20 feet tall and I'm 2 feet tall. But it doesn't matter.
But somehow,
We're in the fitting room switching out clothes and
how
it's
does that
like the
work?
traveling pants. I don't know, but it does. It
And
works.
these hips, and
Oh,
I'm
baby,
I'm
look
not
at
putting
me. Ah, da, 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 da. Hips don't lie.
they they have more girth than yours do. And so, but
Just because I
somehow,
ride on one of your hips every now and again.
somehow, I'm just
Somehow
picturing it. I'm picturing
I'm
it.
picturing.
I'm
So
gonna start presenting with you on my hip. Like,
I'm picturing. Oh my gosh, I'm actually laughing.
put together.
she used to. People cried.
Fussy. She's fussy.
Okay, it's not that funny. Oh my gosh. Wish you hadn't said that. Okay.
You started it with the riding
Okay.
on my hips.
Okay. Stop.
I
I'm just
even-
playing more things out of my head.
Oh, I
right
know.
now. I'm
I
gonna
know. And
stop.
your
I'm gonna stop.
visualization, am I bouncing you? Because I'm bouncing.
Walking around. Okay, stop.
Woo.
Anyway, we had a good time.
We
had a
always have a good
real
time. We could
We had a real
go.
good time. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where we go. We have a good time. We laugh. All right.
Somebody else that I think we could have a good time with is our guest today.
Agreed.
Think that we need to consider bouncing her.
I had started touching base with Darbie back months ago to do she did something for us, and we'll talk about that as we get into the podcast. But she's you can just tell that person that's got that quick wit and that funny personality and knows her stuff. And I was just so impressed with her. We were so impressed with her. And so we're very, very, very happy to have her on our podcast today.
I'm so excited about our guest today because I feel like you're finally going to shut your pie hole, because all I have heard is, oh my goodness, we have to have Darbie on. We have to have Darbie on. So I feel like this is achieving two goals today. Number one, we have a fantastic guest on. And number two, this will make you be quiet.
Pie hole. Shut my pie hole. Oh, we use some very educational language. Yes, I am so excited. I just love her name, Darbie. Darbie.
I know. It's like, if I weren't geriatric, I would consider having another child just to name that child Darbie.
I know. I love it.
Your child would not get any personalized license plates for their bike or any keychains, though. So
okay. And I'm out.
Now I feel better.
I don't know how. I'm going to go down that road just a second. I don't know how with kids' names today anybody gets any kind of, keychain or anything with their name on it. Because every time I drive by, the little pre-K where they're putting out the happy birthday to KO, literally K and O, or, Waji. I don't know.
Okay, let's stop because you're offending people
whose names are KO and Waji.
Unless they in KO, yes, and we spell it just like that.
And unless they're Star Wars fans, I don't know that they would.
If your name is Wedgie, though, you've got bigger problems.
Just saying, where are they coming up with the names? I don't know.
Middle school years are going to be hard if that's your name.
I just am like, everybody wants to be very individualized.
But
I don't
Darbie,
know.
I feel like there was a Babysitters Club member who was named Darbie or something.
I did not know that.
I may be thinking Shelby.
Pick out some of those books.
Yeah, this is worth some research.
There is the Winnie the Pooh cartoon when they revised that, like about a decade or so ago. There is a Darbie on there, but it's spelled like Darby, like the boy version.
Darbie, I love it.
It's adorable, just like she is. She's adorable.
Adorable Darbie, not adorable, but adorable Darbie.
Adorable Darbie. Okay,
adorable Darbie. But thank you, Darbie. You are adorable for coming on today. And, we appreciate all that you have shared about dysregulation and about student behaviors and how to help teachers with these this uptick and some new behaviors that we're seeing. And so I know that you have been Teacher of the Year before in Missouri. You are a Missourian. You have won awards. You are an incredible educator, and so we are going to just shut our pie holes. And I am going to turn this over to you and just let you go to town. I've got my sweet tea right here. So I'm ready to go and listen to you for a while. All right, Darbie.
So does that mean I open my pie hole now? That what's
Pie hole
happening?
open.
Pie hole open.
Okay. Well, and I love and appreciate the fact that you brought up my awards, but I will say that none of those would have happened without the students that I've been able to teach for the last 20 years. And so there's so many different accolades that I got because my students pushed me to be better. And without them, I wouldn't have received any of that attention. So, and I love that it's because of those awards that have landed me in various places, and getting to cross paths with the two of you is one of those reasons. And so, but I was so honored to get to be on your Behavior Detour conference and be included in that star-studded lineup that you had. I have a little bit of imposter syndrome after getting to go back and hear some of those presentations. But in that presentation, I shared about one particular student. And this is a student that I think a lot of teachers can relate to, because it's a student that is very similar to who they may have in their class right now, or a student that they're trying to support. And if you've been in education any amount of time, then you've had that student that kind of just shakes you to your core and changes the way that you do business. And for me, that student we'll call her Junie. And Junie, all I have to say is 2 words. She was that kid. She was the kid whose name the teacher put on the sub plans to keep an eye out for. She was the one that always was causing disruptions, always getting in fights with other kids, challenging status quo, just pushing back on teachers, just doing anything except for what she was supposed to do. And I'm convinced that every behavior is a form of communication. And I know we hear that a lot in our profession. And I think that some of our kids that are bringing in stories with them are trying to communicate those stories, and they don't always communicate them in the most beautiful ways. And that's what was going on with Junie. So the story that she carried into the classroom was a rather painful one. And when you think about just different childhood ACEs or adverse childhood experiences, Junie suffered many of those, and especially when we think about the 3 different types of abuse: physical, mental, and sexual abuse. She was so physically abused that there would be times that she would miss school for a week at a time because she'd been beaten so severely she wouldn't be able to be seen in public. There was also mental abuse, which she would have quarters tossed at her to tell her to go and call DFS because her parents wanted DFS to come and pick her up and take her away because they no longer wanted her to live there. She also suffered sexual abuse at the hands of multiple offenders, one of who should have been a caretaker for her. And a lot of times when we think about childhood trauma, we think about abuse and all the bad things that happen to kids, but neglect is just as harmful because it's all the good stuff that never happens. And typically when we think about neglect, we think about 2 different kinds. We think about emotional neglect and physical neglect. And Junie definitely endured both of those. Emotional neglect, she was never held, never hugged, never told she was loved. And this not only happened at home, but also at school, because like I already said, she was that kid, always causing disruptions, always fighting with other students and with teachers. And so she wasn't a kid that teachers really wanted to wrap in a warm embrace or hug or show a lot of affection to. They also didn't want to do that because Junie was a stinky kid. Because of that physical neglect, she was always just filthy, covered in head lice, had a stench about her. And come to find out that Junie's family owned a small diner in their town. And in that diner was a pantry just wide enough for a twin-size bed to fit in. And that's actually where Junie lived. So when the restaurant would close every day and the family would pack up and go home, Junie would be left there living in that pantry. So not only did she have the isolation leading to more emotional neglect, but she also had the smell of a greasy dive restaurant, no access to washing machine, no access to showers, to baths. And so she would clean herself the best she could there in the bathroom of the restaurant. So another reason why teachers didn't always want to embrace her in that loving embrace. And when we think about some of the other typical adverse childhood experiences like divorce, she witnessed her mom go through several divorces. One was, and she watched her mom be a victim of domestic abuse, which is considered another ACE. And that was at the hands of an alcoholic stepfather, which living with somebody who is an abuser is also considered an adverse childhood experience. And then there's also other things like she experienced homelessness. Her mother was never incarcerated, but her mom would be in and out of jail for different amount of times. Her mother suffered from mental illnesses, which both went untreated, and we know that could cause anxiety and even depression in children growing up in environments like that. And then let's just throw a natural disaster in there too. So Junie lived in a town that was flooded in the Great Flood of '93, and therefore was displaced because of that. So and bouncing around from foster home to foster home, and living with different people in the community, there was a lot of instability in Junie's life. And so that's what caused a lot of those outward behaviors. And if you look at any research connected to adverse childhood experiences, then you would see that the stats aren't in Junie's favor. And so, but I am definitely one that truly believes that an ACE score is not a predictor of failure. And I know that the power of relationships can help any child overcome what it is that they're enduring. And I know this because I watched Junie become attached to a teacher and form a really strong bond with that teacher. That teacher was able to convince her that she might be able to graduate high school, which seemed a little far-fetched because neither of Junie's siblings ever did. And then as graduation grew closer, she even started to plant the seed in Junie that she might be able to go to college. And so that teacher really worked with her and helped her secure some scholarships and develop a plan to get her through college. And so that same teacher was able to watch her walk across the stage and become a first-generation college graduate. And when she graduated with a degree in education because she decided to devote her life to the very thing that she felt helped save hers. And so she wanted to become a teacher. And so that teacher, whose name is Mrs. Carlina Leeper, not only watched Junie walk across the stage and become a first-generation college graduate, but she also got to watch little Junie walk across the stage and be named the 2017 Missouri Teacher of the Year. So I would like to just introduce myself one more time. My name is Darbie Valenti Huff, and I share my story as visible proof that what we do in education matters, and that no matter what, we can be the ones that can change the trajectory of a child's life. So, and hopefully that wasn't too heavy of an intro for those listening, or probably just like, what just happened? But I share my story not to ever elicit sympathy, but I always share my story so that we can see what it's like, what it can be like on the other side for these kids that we serve, and to show that we just always need to be kinder than necessary, and a little kindness can go a long way.
I have got chill bumps all over my body.
I can't even speak.
I have so many questions, and Laura, I know that we're going to take turns.
You were taking turns.
We're going to take turns.
Do I need to monitor that to make sure?
Yes, because sometimes we don't take turns. I knew that story. We knew that story, but it's such an important story right now as we're getting ready to go back to school. and my mind cannot help but go to those students who, whether we do it consciously or subconsciously, we are writing off because we have those little Junies who we are like, we cannot in any way envision them ever coming out of this poverty, this abuse, this dysfunction that they're living in. And so I needed this as a reminder, and I hope that this is a reminder for our teachers and everyone that's dealing with kids, that we want to be the one that makes a difference in a child's life, and I'm picturing these kids. I'm just seeing these kids in my mind.
We have too many visuals in our heads right now of all the little Junies that we have served and that we are serving. And so, but I think it's so important for us to remember, a lot of times it's easy to get caught up in that there's only so much I can do, and I can't help what happens beyond the four walls of the school. And there's actually what we can do can be the thing that changes their life for sure. Because statistically, I shouldn't be here with you today. I, should be addicted or in jail, or if even alive at this point. So.
Exactly. And you're exactly right, those statistics. And I think that's our default. Laura, I jumped in and did it again. It's your turn. Go, girl.
Well, I'm counting that as a closure to your question, so I will allow it.
That's so gracious.
Yes, thank you. So I want to know, out of all of the teachers that you encountered throughout your school career, what was it about this one that just you connected with her? What was it?
I think first and foremost, I think she had a little bit of an advantage because she was my art teacher. And so I went to a small K-12 school. And I don't know if you have K-12 schools around you where kindergarten through 12th grade is all in one building. And so since we were so small, I got to have her as my elementary, junior high back in those days, and high school art teacher. So there was that level of consistency that I got to have with her. But also, because I went to a small school, art was pitted up against band in the schedule. So I didn't even get to have her for several years because I was well on my way to being a talented trumpeter, or whatever you call somebody that plays the trumpet. You can see how invested I was in that. but I was in band, so I couldn't take art classes. And so this woman tracked me down in the hallways, and she would say, "Good morning, Darbie. How are you, Darbie? How are things going, Darbie?" And I just remember, it's so funny that you started off this podcast talking about my name, because it was one of the first times that I'd ever heard my name like in a positive tone of voice, or someone using a because usually it was, someone scolding me or getting on to me. And I even had one teacher, and I won't say what grade level it was because in a small school that singles it out a little too much. But I even had one teacher who wouldn't write my name on the board before she gave me all the check marks. She wrote Little Miss Innocent. Like, that's what she called me. That's what she wrote on the board before I got check mark after check mark. And it got to be so much that you didn't want to write Little Miss Innocent every day. So every day she just erased my check marks and left my name up there. And so every day I walked into that classroom, I had literally a strike against me. And Mrs. Leeper, every day was a fresh, clean slate. No matter what I had done the art class before, no matter what I had torn up or what I had done, what I had said to her, she never took anything personally. And she always gave me a fresh, clean slate, and then always treated me with such kindness. Even when she saw me in the hallway, didn't have to talk to me. She always did. And so, and I laugh when I didn't have her as a teacher. She would stand in the lunch line by me and walk through the lunch line, even though teachers, could go to the back and get their plate and go sit down. I would shut my locker door and she would be right there. And I tell people she was like whack-a-mole. No matter what I did, I could not get rid of her. But what she was doing is like, she was helping rebuild those neural pathways to show me that adults could be trusted. Because adults in my life were not people that had been good to me. And when we think about a lot of our kids that come from trauma, think about who causes that harm. So many cases, it's adults. And so they are pre-wired to think that adults are not safe people, even when they might be surrounded by safe adults in the school setting. So she was the first one that really helped me believe that I could trust adults, but it took a lot of years and a lot of convincing.
With all the trauma that you were experiencing, your behavior was a cry for help, obviously.
Yeah.
Would you say yours was more of the fight, or were how did you display or what did it change as you matured?
I think it's interesting because when I share about fight, flight, and freeze behaviors. There's also fawn. And so a lot of my behaviors at home would be freeze behaviors because at home I didn't want to be seen. I needed to stay under the radar. I did not want to be noticed. But in the school setting, I would absolutely go into fight mode. And so it's very interesting how in the two different settings that's how my body would respond and how my stress response system would respond. Still to this day, I have a lot of fawn behaviors. I am a people pleaser. I will do whatever it is that I need to make sure to keep people happy. So much so that I lead a lot of professional development now. And the amount of time that I put into making sure that my candy baskets have anything and everything. Like there's chocolate, there's hard candies, there's sugar-free candies, there's sweet, there's sour. I still have so many of those fawn behaviors, but my stress response go-to system is still that freeze. And I think that's what I experienced most as a child, especially at home, would be that freeze behavior. But
that makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also people are real quick to label me as having attention-seeking behaviors. And I really try to get educators to shift that mindset from attention-seeking to connection-seeking. And I think that what I wanted and needed more than anything was connection. And we know that humans are hardwired for connection. And I wasn't getting that need met at home. And I think that's what I was wanting at school, more so than attention. I think I just wanted that connection.
Makes sense. Yeah.
There's so much there, and I'm taking notes. Like everything that you say, I am putting it down here because there's so much to unpack with this. You mentioned that with your teacher, it was a fresh slate every day. And you said no matter what I'd done to her, no matter what I'd said to her. And I'm just curious can you paint us a picture there of what it looked like between you and her? Because when you said that, it makes me think maybe every day was not a great day between the two of you. So
and part of it is I don't always recall everything of how I acted when I was younger, but I do know that there were things that I tore up, and I think back to I got to student teach under her. So I certified elementary or art, and because of her, she was my art teacher, of course. So when I student taught under her, I realized how expensive the art room is and how much that I tore up or destroyed or just didn't was completely defiant, and how she could have been very angry at me, especially with probably how much money came out of her pocket because of my behaviors. But I really don't remember that point in our relationship where I finally started trusting her until about my junior year. And that's also when I got to take art classes again. And so that's when I really look back and reflect on I could trust this woman, and that the relationship was not transactional, because unfortunately I had been whether it's relationships in my personal life that were transactional, like my mother needing me to work in the restaurant. So that's why I lived in the pantry, because she needed me to wait tables, but she didn't want me to live with her. So that's how I ended up in the pantry, very transactional relationship. I had some different coaches and sponsors that loved me during a specific season, but as soon as the season was over, then forgot that I even existed. And so with her, there was having a relationship with me, she didn't get anything out of that. And so she was showing me that I could trust people and trust adults. I still didn't trust very many, but she was showing me that she was different. So I think it was probably about my junior year when I finally let that guard down. Not saying that guard was down every day either. I'm sure I was quick to put it back up. So one thing that I like to remind educators is that it's hard, especially when I was an elementary teacher, that you may not reap the benefits of that relationship that year. And that's a tough pill to swallow. But if we can start planting those seeds that adults can be safe people, that they're humans that you can trust, then in the long run, that's what's going to be important in that child's life.
So I know, and that is one of the reasons that Laura and I've devoted so much time to behavior and really hoping, that educators change the way they look at behaviors, because we know now, instead of that being an outlier, your behavior, and I think yours was pretty intense. It sounds like you would have been tier 3 now, in the behavior. You'd had a behavior plan.
They may have even created a new tier for me.
They may have created, and I'm trying to wrap my head around that, and I want to talk about that, but I'm trying to I'm so interested. I just want to ask personal questions that I want to know more about you. But I'm thinking about the time that we're living in. We are seeing more and more of the behaviors that you displayed. I would say, there's probably where there would be one in a school. Now there's one in a class, at least one in a grade, where it's pretty severe. What do you think is causing the uptick in the behaviors that we're seeing? I know we have talked about it and exhausted, but do you have a theory coming from your own personal experience? Maybe you have a different thought.
I would say I've been out of the classroom for 3 years now, but I still get to be in classrooms with a lot of the teachers I support. But during the last probably, I would say 6 or 7 years that I was in the classroom, I think the opioid crisis contributed to a lot of the behaviors that I was starting to see more of. I've seen them my whole entire career, but it did seem like there were more and more of those. And so, and I've always taught in Title I schools, so I've always taught in areas of high poverty. But when the opioid crisis started, and then, unfortunately, my area of the state, or our state really as a whole, you've seen maybe Ozark on Netflix. It's not that far fetched. So we're battling a lot of that. So even before the pandemic, I think that was what was causing possibly a lot of the uptick in behaviors. And then with the pandemic, when we think about how the brain develops, the part of the brain that does need that emotional connection, the mid part of the brain, like that's becoming fully developed about age around 3rd grade, and a little bit older. And so I think about, we talk about how resilient kids are, but we dismiss what happened in their brain development at such a crucial state. And so I think we expect kids to be resilient, but we don't take into consideration what happened to their brain development during the time of shutdown. And I will admit, I'm in rural Missouri. Some people even say, was there really a pandemic here? Because we really did carry on like business like normal with the next school year. But even that shutdown created a lot of isolation and a lot of just fear and worry and anxiety. And I think that has played an impact.
Yeah, I think it certainly perpetuated what was coming anyway. I think it perpetuated. And then, we're seeing, in addition to that, those fight behaviors where we're ready to throw the teacher up against, the whiteboard. We're seeing a lot of attention deficit, but they're just, and we feel that it's a lot due to this TikTok generation, where it's like their brains are actually, so it's just a different day. And you work with teachers. What are some of your top tips for dealing with dysregulated students?
I think the first thing is prioritizing getting the students to regulate. And really, in a dream world, we create those proactive structures and put those proactive structures in place to where we hopefully don't see a lot of dysregulation. But then if we do see that students are dysregulated, how can we get them regulated again as soon as possible? And then making sure that we think about the brain. And so if I'm trying to dole out consequences, then when a kid's in the downstairs part of their brain, that's not going to stick because they're not capable of comprehending and using logic and using reasoning until we can access the upstairs part of the brain. And so especially all the new teachers we work, we explain the brain model to them and the neurosequential model so that they have that understanding. And one thing I didn't share when I shared about Junie is that my 8th grade year alone, I had 56 detentions and 24 days of in-school suspension. So that's why I said you might need a whole new tier for me. But one thing that we can't do is we can't discipline the trauma out of a child. And so no matter how many consequences we dole out, it's just not going to work. We can't discipline the trauma out of a kid. So one thing I like to do in workshops that are live, I have a volunteer and I have them do a number 6 draw a number 6 in the air with their dominant hand. And then as they're doing that, I have them with the toe on the same side, try to draw a clockwise circle. And then they realize they can't do it. And so then I will, get out like a $10 bill and be like, I'll give you this $10 bill if you can do this. And they still can't do it. So I'm like, do I need to get out a 20? Come on, here's a $20 bill. And so I just show them like the carrots and sticks. It's not effective. So a lot of times when we dangle those things in front of kids, trying to get them to calm down, they're not comprehending it and they're trying the best they can too. So I'm also going down an executive function rabbit hole right now, which is really fun. And I think too, also seeing what the brain is ready for and what it's capable for in terms of executive function. I wish I would have known more of that when I was in the classroom because it would have drastically impacted the way that I handled consequences with students.
And I think that's and Laura, it was your turn.
It's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think
know the brain is your hot button. So go ahead.
Oh gosh, I'm so into this. So I know for educators, even our youngest educators are not coming out of college with this knowledge. So it's a growth mindset for them to understand that to not consequences, let's just say discipline. They want that child. They've done X. I want a discipline.
Yep.
Now.
Retaliation and revenge.
Retaliation, whether we really want to call it that. Yeah. And I get it. I mean, I'm trying to teach a lesson and you are, whatever you're doing. And some of these kids can be downright scary. I get that.
Yeah.
But to do the same thing, I call it hamster on the wheel. If you do the same thing over, you're just it makes no difference. Yeah. So we do believe in consequences, but we do believe that consequences need to be done in the time that the kid is in their space, in their right brain space, that they can understand that consequence. So it's a very difficult time for educators because educators are saying, I'm trying to teach and I can't because of this behavior. And I get it. And then there's no quick fix for this. And so we're really focusing at our school on that time and space that they need to get in their brain so that we can then talk about consequences or, retrain whatever skill is missing or teach whatever skill is missing. But I think that's why Laura and I feel so passionate about this because so many teachers are walking away because they're like, I don't know what to do. I mean, this isn't how even my very youngest teachers, this is not how it was even when they were in high school. This much of the behavior that we're seeing. So it is very difficult to change our mindset, even if we think we're changing it. We go back into those, like you're saying, those pathways where this happens, so now this needs to happen. So we're kind of in this battle of what do we do, because we have those pushing, saying, I want discipline, I want them out of my classroom. And then we, have, if you know better, you do better. So you're saying, no, there's a reason we've got Junies in our school who are living in hell, and then they come to school. They don't care if we paddle them. They don't care if we put them in, if we're not teaching those skills. So that's our big thing. We talk a lot about reteaching, not reteaching, teaching skills that were missed. These kids didn't get those skills.
Yes. And just like when I was a 5th grade math teacher, I retaught adding fractions with unlike denominators over and over and over again, because my kids didn't get the first time, they didn't get the second time, they didn't get it the third time. It felt like that was a skill that I retaught so much. And so if we start to treat behaviors like we do academics, we put in different interventions for kids that aren't getting academic skills. And it's that same mindset. But at the same time, I never excuse these behaviors. I mean, if something goes flying across the classroom, we're putting other kids, possibly in harm. And so we talk about that. What are your consequences going to be? But like you said, we're talking about it when they're in their right headspace. So it's not that I'm ever validating the behaviors, but I will validate the feelings behind the behaviors, because those are real and those cause that to happen. And the more that I do that, I can prevent that from happening over and over and over again. Doesn't mean that it's going to stop right then. But I will have to say that a lot of the new teachers I work with, though, I'm so impressed with how many are familiar with restorative practices from some of the ed prep programs. And so I think having that background knowledge and having that understanding helps. But again, when you're in that moment and something goes flying across the classroom and you go into your downstairs part of the brain, because you're not only trying to survive, but you're trying to help the other students in the classroom to survive. I totally get it. And so being in that moment, you are just humanly reactive. But so, yeah, I understand the battle that our teachers are going through for sure.
There are so many different directions that I'd like to go. I know our time is limited, but it's like I want to go down all these different directions.
Wait, you didn't block off 7 hours?
Yes, but I need 8.
7.
I need 8.
Okay. I was just clarifying.
Kim, how many times have you been talking to a teacher or a family member or somebody, and you're explaining the brain, or you're explaining like this aha moment that I think educators across the world are having, and they have said things like, if I had only known the rest of the story, or if I had only known what was going on in the brain. I feel like that is just a common conversation once it clicks with people. Do you find that to be the case?
I think, and I preface like all my trainings with like, hey, I'm a brain research geek. And, and you can kind of see the looks on some people's faces, but then they're wanting more and more. They're wanting to know more. And when you teach kids about the brain, they're the same way. Like when I would teach my kids about their amygdala, like they wanted to know more. And there's a new teacher I work with in a local district. And I was in her classroom, and I just like a little moment came to me, a little teachable moment where I was like, oh, this will be a great time to teach them about this about their brains. And so like now when I come back in, they're like, are you going to teach us something about our brains today? And so I think that it's not something that I learned through any ed prep program or anything like that. It was through my own professional development. I never learned it even in district PD. And so, but I think that it's one thing that teachers really do appreciate when they learn and understand more of the brain. Because when you think about it, the brain is connected to all of our senses. Our senses is what is all the input is coming in through our senses. So whether we're teaching or dealing with behaviors, all of it goes back to that. And so the more that we understand about the brain and how it functions, the more effective we can be instructionally, and also when supporting behaviors.
So Darbie, I have to, I can't even keep a question in my head because I'm just going from here to here. So
well, and I think sometimes I start to answer your question and then I go over here.
No, all of it is so interesting to us, and understanding the brain when you were growing up and you started to realize what fight, flight, freeze, you were starting to understand the brain. Did that help you heal? Did that go, oh, that's why? I mean, what was that like?
I will say, when you said when you were growing up, I did not learn this stuff until my late 30s, probably. And then here I am, mid 40s. And so it's been a relatively recent journey. But when you think about the trauma informed movement, like I think about the ACE study that was done like during my high school years. And then we didn't really carry that over into education until well into my teaching career. And so, but I will tell you, the more that I've learned, the more that I understand about myself. And so there's so many things that now make sense to me that didn't make sense to me before. One thing is my counselor, I could never feel like my counselor was a safe person. Part of that was when DFS would come to take pictures of my bruises and things like that, that always took place in the counselor's office. So that didn't seem like a safe place for me because I was automatically in defense mode and doing what I could to protect my mom, saying what I was supposed to say. But also, I didn't realize either until years later, when I learned about the senses and how smell is the quickest way to the brain to get a child to regulate, but it's also the quickest way to get them to dysregulate. And I think back to the smell of my counselor. He wore Old Spice because that was like the 80s and 90s version of Axe. One of my sexual offenders wore Old Spice. Oh. And I didn't know, like, I didn't even put all that together until I was in my 40s. And so the more that I learn, the more that I understand, and the more that I've been able to heal. I started writing a book a couple of years ago. And when I wrote my book, which it's been done for 2 years and it's sitting in my Google Drive because typical avoidance behavior that's related to trauma. But during that time, I knew that I was going to have to like prioritize my physical health also, because I'd started going and doing more trauma presentations, sharing Junie's story, which you can tell the way that I've crafted that. It's a dissociation tactic. I share about Junie and not me, because that's a way I can dissociate to get through the story. But when I sat down to write that book, I knew that I was going to have to like face some things that I had not faced for decades. And I prioritized my health, and between releasing that trauma and prioritizing my health, in a year's time, I lost 100 pounds, or a little over 100 pounds. And so, disappointing, this is my after body. But I think like when we think about when we think about trauma, a lot of people think it's a memory that's stored in the brain, but it's actually stored as stress in the body. And so until we can get that released, then we're going to still see some of those outward signs of trauma too. So the more, it makes our work even more important, right? To help our students release that stress. And that's another thing that I think with the behaviors that we're seeing a lot of kids that aren't maybe even experiencing trauma, but they're experiencing anxiety, but that stress brain reacts the same way, whether it's a stressful situation or trauma. And so I think too, the more that we help support students through their stress, the more that we'll be able to hopefully de-escalate some of these behaviors.
I don't even know whose turn it is. I'm just,
I have to ask, and can you update like where you're at right now, like with your journey through this? Because you are such an inspiration and hope for those who have those high ACE scores and have gone through so much trauma, because you are the complete opposite of what you think about when you think about all that you've gone through. So like you have to deal with that probably all the time still, right? I mean, is that just doesn't go away. So have you done therapies? What have you done to help yourself? Because you can't just wish this away, or you can't just, it's too painful, it's too powerful, especially if there's sexual abuse for a woman involved in this, or a man. If there's all these things put together, I mean, you're knocking on a 10. So how have you managed to be what you are right now?
Well, first of all, I think it's just by the grace of God. And I don't know if I could say that on a podcast.
You sure can. You absolutely can.
I absolutely believe that. And especially because one thing I didn't share was that when I lived in the pantry, my mom came down at 11 o'clock at night because they lived in the apartment above the restaurant, and kicked me out of the pantry. And I was just like, okay, like I can't even live in the same building anymore. And it was 11 o'clock at night, and I was just walking around town like, what am I going to do now? And the lights at the parsonage of where the preacher at my church lived were on. And that was a place that when my mom would go to jail, sometimes I would stay there for a few weeks at a time, or when my mom would kick me out, I would end up there. And so I remember knocking on the door, and I said, Mom just kicked me out again. Can I stay here tonight? And he said, no. And I was just like, okay. And I turned to walk away, and he said, you're not staying here tonight because you're actually coming here to live. And he goes, you know where your room's at? And he's like, we'll go get your stuff tomorrow. And so moving in with my foster parents, I was my sophomore year. It was just right before I turned 16. And getting to have some stability, that made a huge difference in my life. Of course, my faith grew stronger then too. But one thing that I was always able to do was my mom always allowed me to go to church. And Sundays were a busy day for the restaurant, but she always let me go to Sunday school. And as long as I got back to the restaurant right after Sunday school to get ready for the busy rush, then she would let me go. So that is one thing that definitely helped get me through then, and still does today. I think too, writing my book, I knew would be very therapeutic. And so that's something that's helped me heal. And then the more that I get to help support teachers, I'm going to tear up, because I know that it's so impossible for teachers right now, but all I want to really convey to them is just how critical they are in their students' success, and how the little things that they think don't even matter are the things that are going to be what can turn it around for those children. And so there's times where if I'm booked, especially that first week of August, where people want me every single day. And I love when I get to do like an engagement strategy presentation or something in there, but that's not always the case. And some weeks I'm booked back to back to back on this topic. And I know it's important, but those are really hard weeks for me. Just kind of reliving that. And so, but I know that it's worth it, because I know all too well the burden that these kids carry. And so one thing that I try to do is right after I have that big Junie reveal and everybody's kind of like, what? I let them reflect with who they're sitting next to, and then I open it up to questions, and I let people ask me whatever question that they want. And a lot of times people are hesitant because they're afraid that it's going to cause me pain, or they're like, I don't want to ask this because this could be painful. And there are times where it definitely is painful, but if I can carry that burden instead of a child in their classroom carrying that burden, then I'm more than happy to be the one, because I'm on this side of it and those kids aren't. So again, I don't know if I really answered your question.
You more than answered.
You so very much answered my question. You are a miracle, and I think this is perfect timing as we go back into our classrooms and back into the school, to be that person. We call them rope holders, and to find that Junie and to make a difference in their lives. Laura has heard me tell this so many times, and that's why I'm so involved in and so excited about sharing behaviors. I didn't live it. My dad and his family did. So he has an ACE score of 9 and his sister's 10. So all the things. And to this day, he's 70 something. To this day, he will cry talking about school like it was just yesterday. And he can remember details of how he was treated. It's not the other kids that bothered him. It was the way he was treated by the teachers and what they were already expecting his behavior to be. And so he met them on what they were expecting. Of course, we know now the trauma and what it had done to his brain and his, that fight, flight, or freeze. And so it's a pain that I don't think ever goes away, how you were treated. And I think we as educators need to know that may be a child, but they're going to grow up and they are never going to forget those kindnesses, but they're never going to forget those slights or, and if they could do better, they would do better. And Laura and I have done presentations where we share a picture. I have a little boy with a disability, and you can see it when he walks in the room with his wheelchair and his hearing aids. He has a disability, and he is treated through school. He was treated like he was the mascot. Unfortunately, he was raw. But these kids are coming in, and we can't see that hearing aid, and we can't see that whatever. But it is so there. It's so present, and so much more. I think can be so much more debilitating because if there's not love, my child was loved. Yeah. And so if we could see, but we can't, we don't have those goggles to see. So we have to treat, if their behavior is showing us, whether it's the freeze or the fight or whatever it is, there's, like you say, there is a story there. What is their story?
Move in closer and find out what is causing that behavior. What are they communicating to us? And I think too, it's so important to always treat kids not only with kindness and dignity, just because that's how we should treat all human beings, but I think it helps them define who they are. Because I knew I was the bad kid, like you were mentioning with your grandpa. I was going to live up to that. If you thought I was the bad kid, I was going to be the best bad kid you ever taught. And so I was going to make life miserable for you. I was going to live up to whatever perception you had of me. And then that developed into my own self-perception. I was at home. I obviously was not a human that was capable of being loved. And then that's how I felt at school. And so for a long time, that's how I felt about myself. And so just treating kids with kindness and dignity can start to also plant those seeds that, I am a worthy human being. I am somebody who can be loved and that should be loved.
Perfect, Darbie. Thank you so much. We kept you longer than we said we would, and we apologize for that. But I think we could go on and on, don't you, Laura?
Longer, yeah.
And I think that we will definitely have you on again, and have you part of our. We want you again for our conference, and if you missed that, if you're listening, there were so many things in that conference that were so good, and we hope to have you again next year with that, Darbie. But
I do want to ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do want to ask one thing. You do trainings for school systems? Okay, yes, so absolutely. If someone wanted to get in touch with you to do something like that, what needs to happen?
They would be able to email me. My email is darbieh@msta.org. Darbie with an IE. And can you put that in the show notes probably? And so, or yes. I'm Miss D Valenti on different socials too. So just reaching out to me. I would love to support however possible. I am in Missouri, so if there's times where, like with your conference, I've led virtual trainings. It's not quite as powerful as the in-person ones, but I've also been like guest during book studies and different things like that. So I love getting creative with how we can best support our teachers so that they can best support our students.
Well, that was one of those that had tears and we laughed and even after we stopped recording her, she kept going and the story was even more incredible the more
Yeah.
that we talked to her and just we our I think our mouths were open, our jaws dropped the more she talked. So we dove a little bit more into some other things that had happened to her. Just unreal.
Yeah, I'm in love with her. I was taking so many notes as she was talking, and it really is so timely because it's inspired me to be that teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the intentional like that it sounds like that teacher was intentional and persistent, and that's an important combination because you can have every intention of reaching out, but she was persistent enough to follow her in the lunch line or to seek her out and speak to her. And I would like to be intentional and persistent.
And I think with our kids that are in middle school and high school, by the time they're in middle school, there is such a chip on their shoulders that it's almost palatable. And
Yeah.
so to overcome that, to look past that chip on their shoulder and how they're going to respond to you, because it's almost like, they're the size of another adult.
Yeah.
And to feel like, because there's gonna be pushback, but it sounds like that teacher overcame those barriers. I mean, it there was nothing that Darbie could throw out that she would not rise to the occasion and look at her behavior as a story. There's a reason that she saw what she could be, and that's amazing.
Well, and I think it's important for us and all educators to remember that we always think, gosh, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've heard this so many times when you tell a story or you talk about a student or what some of our students have gone through. How many times have you heard, gosh, I just wish I had them in my class. I would love them if I had them. Oh my goodness, I would just love on them. And you do have them in your class. They are there, and they don't always smell great, and they don't always act great, and they don't always play the part that you want them to play. And I think it's just understanding that sometimes we have this ideal thought of what we would be like if we had those behaviors, and it's just not always pretty.
Right. And I think we hear the stories
Yeah,
and we see her now and we're like,
yeah.
oh, if I was her teacher. Well, no, she was that kid that you have in there. Think about it.
Which I can't imagine her.
With her, that was the hard part I was having too. It's just imagining her doing things that were, tearing things up in the art room or,
Yeah,
but I mean, living in a pantry, being sexually abused. I mean, what else would she do? What else would she do but not trust adults? And
exactly.
yeah, and so it's just unreal. But share this with other educators. This is one of those messages that everybody needs to be reminded of,
I
that
think
they have a Junie in their class.
it would be a great one to share out as a school counselor. Share it out to your staff because everybody needs to hear this, especially right here before school starts.
Absolutely.
Let me say this too. Another thing that stood out to me was she said the teacher had an advantage because of the longevity. Like she had been with her from kindergarten through each year,
Mm-hmm.
And to me, as school counselors, there are some of us that are at a K through 12 school, but if you're not, to me, this is the importance of collaborating with those other school counselors who know those stories at the level underneath you and the level above you, wherever you are. It's kind of our responsibility to have those conversations and find out who are the kids with the stories that we need to be watching out for. And of course, watch out for every student and take care of everyone. But it gives us an advantage when we can have those conversations and know those things going into it. Then we kind of know who to be persistent and intentional with.
Yeah. And how great is it that she's given back into
Oh my goodness.
The very things that causes her pain at times to talk about. But she's so passionate about helping those students because she knows how they feel. And she's spreading that message. And it sounds like that's what keeps her busy, is this professional development and helping teachers in Missouri. But now we've got her, and I'm sure other states, but I'm glad that we're getting her voice on our podcast. So we hope that you share it. What do we have coming up, Laura?
Well, depending on when you listen to this, you may be listening to this while you're standing next to us in line for a chicken salad sandwich at ASCA. I don't know. I don't know when you're listening to it. But we are going to be at ASCA.
And we'll be in line for chicken salad. Clearly.
And we are going to be I don't know. I guess I don't have my calendar in front of me, Kim, so I'm not really sure. But I know that we're busy, and I know that we've got a lot of things coming up. Some things that we're not allowed to talk about just yet.
Please say privy.
We're not privy.
I don't think we're using that correctly.
I don't think that's right.
I would like to say it anyway.
Does privy also mean a bathroom?
No, that's a privy.
I may be thinking of privacy.
That's why I said.
I thought there was a privy, though. That is worth researching also.
That's what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to research what a bathroom is called. Just going to research. I'm going to do my dissertation on the difference between a privy and a privy. Privy is you do not have access to this information.
Right.
I have information.
We have the access. We just can't give. Maybe our audience is not yet privy to the information that we have.
Ooh. I think
when they are privy, we can let them know.
When they're privy, we'll give you the privy.
I saw
a T-shirt in line getting chicken salad today. The guy said, the T-shirt said, mind your own biscuits and there'll be no gravy. What does that mean? Mind your own
What if you want gravy? Some people want gravy.
Mind your, instead of business.
Yeah, I got that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just working it through.
Okay. Mind your own biscuits.
And there'll be no gravy.
Some people, I want gravy. Sometimes I want gravy.
Oh, you can tell you want gravy. You take that however you want to.
Well, after the eating disorder podcast, I don't know what I can or can't say to that.
I'm sorry that's right. I was never going to do that again after that podcast. I apologize. It's a habit. I'm developing new brain pathways, and that's one I need to do. Change. Is mocking you about your eating. Sorry.
So just check with us about where we're going to be. I know we're speaking at Disney World. I'm excited about that. That's in the fall.
Oh, you remember that one?
I remember that.
Can't remember one tomorrow, but you were ready.
Well, I remember all of them, but I don't know which ones we can talk about just yet. How's that?
Oh, say it again. Make yourself sound more important.
It's top secret information.
Oh my gosh, Homeland Security.
Well, you can like us on Instagram, I think. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. But here's the thing we'd really love for you to do. If you could rate and review this podcast, that would be great. And you can usually do that wherever you listen to the podcast, or you can go to Apple Podcasts and drop a little note in there about what this podcast is meant for you, even if you wish we would quit.
Oh.